Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from True Story FM.
And I'm Pete Wright from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
Today, we are talking about Minute 10, which begins with 4F and ends with S.H.I.E.L.D. Mark 1. Joining us on the show, sadly, the last time this week, we have Kurtis Findlay from the Epic Marvel Podcast. Hello, Kurtis.
Hi, it is sad. This time has just flown by.
It goes so fast. It really does. I want to end this this week. I want to talk to you about your favorite Captain America moment. Do you have a favorite moment from, it could be from the movies or the comics? What would stand out to you as the thing that you love the most about this character?
Wow. So I will have to say, so I'm Canadian, and I don't have the same, connection, I guess, the patriotic connection to the character as many Americans would identify with. Captain Canuck just doesn't hold the same candle. It doesn't do anything for me. But not to say that Captain America is a bad character or anything. He's great. I just I haven't followed a lot of his comics as closely just because it's like so much American
it's a lot
in there.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But I will say that these movies did a great job of making him an accessible character for me, and I absolutely loved watching him because. So in the last episode, I know we said that the minute that we watched kind of defined all of his actions over the course of these movies, but he still gets a character arc over the course of everything from First Avenger all the way to Infinity War. And the moment when, I don't know if this is too on the nose, but the moment when he picks, this is a big spoiler alert for everybody, the moment he picks up Thor's hammer and is like, this is the realization of everything we've been working toward from the very beginning when he's trying to show the 4F doctor that he's worthy to the point where he picks up the hammer and he has God status. Like, this is what an incredible journey for Captain America over the course of these movies.
Absolutely. It is a powerful moment. And, you can see it in Thor's face when he recognizes it, right? That he knew it. I mean, it plays so powerfully, and it is a really great journey for him to take over the course of the films. That's a great moment.
Yeah.
I have an extended question. Can I ask an extended question?
Yeah.
This movie is, it leans in pretty hard on origin story status, right? I mean, this is sort of the pinnacle of origin story in phase 1, right? Even though we had Tony, but it all takes place in the same time. We have, we've had Hulk, and we've seen all of that. Yeah. And we've met Thor, even though it was less an origin story than here we are in Thor's life. This one actually, as a framing mechanism, is going back in time and showing us an origin story. I am curious from the comic book perspective, maybe less about Captain America and more about adaptations. What is your favorite origin story across the MCU, going back as far as you need to go in the comics?
So origin story in the MCU or the MU? Like specifically movies or in the comics?
Well, specifically to these movies, since we're ostensibly living in the MCU from the theatrical side.
I might have to say Doctor Strange is my favorite because I just love that movie in general, and I thought his origin story about being like his fall from grace and having to pull himself out of the gutter is just a great story. It's the opposite kind of from Steve Rogers, who was already in the gutter and has to crawl his way out. I thought that's probably my favorite origin story, and they take a lot of liberties with it from the comics, but also at the same time, it is still actually very faithful. So they did a good job.
That's what I'm most curious about, is just the level of fidelity that they take to the source material to actually deliver a solid movie experience. That's interesting.
It's hard because
we'll be getting there in about 25 years. So
yeah. A lot of these stories, though, are like, they're just 15 pages or less of comic books.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you had 15 pages of prose, you could fit a lot more information in there, but we have 15 pages of comics. And so like Spider-Man's origin, Captain America, Doctor Strange, all of those, they don't actually give us a lot. It's actually an exercise in how to tell a very concise story in a very little amount of time and space. And they do a great job. And then when you're blowing that up to an hour and a half or a 2-hour movie, yeah, it's not going to be exactly the same. It's impossible. Otherwise, you'd spend the first 10 minutes on the origin and have to move on to something else.
Right.
Well, and plus, as you pointed out, these are all of these films largely are made decades after those origin stories. And so they've had to update them in so many other ways anyway, to just kind of figure out how can we take Tony from the period where he was, a war profiteer back in the
Vietnam.
Korean War and Korea and Vietnam and all that, all the way up to, okay, now he's just, a war profiteer now. And like, it's an easier thing, but still they're having to find ways to adapt them all, except for this one, which is pretty interesting still.
Okay, let's dig into the minute.
Yeah, so we start this minute, this is the end of the conversation that Steve is having with the 4F doctor as, Steve's asking him, can you do anything? He's like, hey, I'm doing it, buddy. I'm saving you, son. And he stamps that big 4F. And that is, the rejection that Steve was hoping to avoid. And what I love about this next scene, we go to a movie theater in New York City. It actually was the Hackney Empire Theater in London where they were filming this because this film was shot over there. What I love about this is that, Steve goes to the movies to console himself. What did you two think of this this transition going from the end of Steve's attempt, his fourth attempt to get into the Army, to the movie theater?
I feel like this is a totally believable salve to his emotional bruising. If you're sitting in a movie theater watching a movie about this, you're already movie people, and you probably know that when you get real depressed, you're going to go to a movie. And so that felt right in alignment with me. Again, a deeply believable character.
It was a perfect setup as well.
Yeah, a perfect setup. And the thing about it that works so effectively is that, movie theaters at this time, they played these newsreels. And what a great way to get exposition out and to kind of help continue defining this character than by using the newsreel trope. Steve sitting here, he's watching the newsreel, and it's stories of the war. Wherever he goes, he can't get away from this. And we have, even Timmy is doing his part as the little kid who's helping collect scrap metal, and Steve is left unable to do anything. And I just thought it was a great knife twist that they were doing to Steve right here.
Timmy gets a nod from voiceover guy. Way to go, Timmy.
What's great about it, though, is it's this newsreel, and we're getting this kind of like knife twist with Steve, but at the same time, it's giving us a sense of what this means to the people in the country right now. And it's effective because we see the reactions of so many of the faces watching this. There's the woman there who, let me just read this from the script. I like how they characterize this. A young woman watches the screen, tears welling. She clearly has a man overseas. Across the aisle, a middle-aged Jewish couple looks somber. What do you two think about kind of the way that they set this all up?
Do we know, just a quick side question, do we know if this newsreel was legit?
There's a credit at the end where they're thanking, I think it's the University of Minnesota that has a large archive. And also, you can just go to the National Archives and you could look at all sorts of newsreels from World War II.
Yeah.
My sense of this, I was trying to see, is this actually pulled from like a real newsreel? My hunch is they found some kind of generic footage that they could use to kind of craft their script.
Yeah.
And then that they re-scripted it with a modern voiceover.
Yeah.
That was kind of my sense of it. It looks like authentic newsreel footage. Nothing.
Sure
You
does.
can always generally tell the recreated stuff.
Yeah. Timmy even looks very authentic.
Even little Timmy.
I thought it looked great, and I thought the setup was, yet again, you mentioned getting exposition out of the way, but it's a very quick character nod as he's the one who keeps yelling, who yells, show some respect to the thug who wants to show the movie already. First of all, thug, why would you go to a movie expecting anything else but a newsreel at this time in history? There's always newsreels. You know it's newsreels. Show up 10 minutes late if you really want to get to the movie, dummy.
He wants to get to the cartoon.
He wanted the cartoon. He wanted the cartoon. So,
but even still, at that time, the cartoons would have been all war related as well. If it was showing a Bugs Bunny cartoon, it would be a wartime Bugs Bunny.
Right. So I felt like that was great, but we also do get the sense of environmental, like cultural weariness with the war and sadness in such a quick and efficient little sequence. I thought it worked very, very well.
What I like about this sequence is that it is telling, the newsreel is telling Steve what he can do at home. What he can still be a hero by saving his scrap metal or whatever. But that doesn't satisfy Steve. Right. He needs to do more. And just the act of him standing up to the loud jerk in the theater shows that he's not going to settle with just scrap metal.
Speaking to kind of what we got out of Steve in Last Minute, as far as his character and what the movie was saying about it, this is another opportunity to have this moment where we're getting this character who wants people to show respect for the country, but really also for these people who are sacrificing their lives, these soldiers who are willing to commit to fighting, Nazism and kind of going overseas, but putting their lives at risk. I think it shows a lot of kind of that sense of Steve. I love the way that these little things that we keep getting in this film are telling us this is this character, and I love those bits because you look at the comics, and as you were saying earlier, Kurtis, like the comics, they're very, they're short, they're very brief, and so you get a sense of Steve Rogers as a patriotic weakling in the comics, but it's very just brief.
You don't even get that he's a patriotic weakling in the comics because you only see him for the first time as he's being ushered in to be part of this experiment. You get nothing before that about.
You get none of the patriotic stuff.
Yeah, so you don't get a sense of him beforehand.
Yeah,
that was all added. That was all added later.
Yeah, and they do that like in the later comics when they're kind of retroactively kind of creating some of that stuff. But at the very beginning, you're right. It's him coming in to do this test. So, and what I love about that also is they really had a need back then to keep people's identities secret. So you had Steve Rogers running around as a soldier with Bucky, his little kid sidekick.
Yeah.
But then he would don his costume as a superhero. It's very funny.
And he did the whole Clark Kent thing where he was a bumbling soldier.
Oh, no.
Right. Why does this Rogers always like getting knocked out or what?
Yeah.
So funny.
It's really interesting just exercise in efficiency too. We talk about how well this gets into the story. Now we don't actually, I think, get into the lab until a half hour into the movie. So it'll be a month or two before we actually get to talk about that. But so far we've known Steve for the last minute and about 40 seconds in the movie theater before he's in his first fight. And think about how much we know about this guy. How much more do we need to know that he's ready to get into the suit?
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what we're really getting here. Is this is a person who is willing to stand up for what's right. There are people in this theater that are clearly being affected by the images they're seeing on the screen. He's not going to take it. He's not going to stand there and let this person just keep screaming. And so, he verbally says, "Hey, you want to shut up?" Like at first time, he's trying to be kinder. Mm-hmm. "Hey, you want to show some respect?" He kind of whispers it. But then when he says, "Hey, you want to shut up," and this guy stands up, this is, I should mention, this is credited as Loud Jerk, played by Kieran O'Connor. Fantastic. Fantastic name. The movie is very good about like when they're naming these supporting characters, these bit players, like 4F Doctor because he gave him a 4F, Loud Jerk because this is the guy being a loud jerk in the movie theater. I love that they're doing that. But so that's Kieran O'Connor, who is huge. That's the other thing. When he stands up, it's just this shadowy voice in the theater. But when he stands up, it is this menacing guy. And that's another strong point here because oftentimes you have a situation like this where the menacing dark figure stands up and it puts that person in their place and they're now the one who's quiet, but not Steve. he's going to go into the alley and fight this person. I don't know. I love how that sets it up. Kurtis, what are your thoughts on kind of this setup for Steve?
When he stood up, it reminded me of Biff from Back to the Future.
Yes.
It's kind of and it's just you have those visual tropes. Like you automatically understand that this guy is like a meathead kind of a guy, not because of what he was saying earlier, but just because they've made him look menacing in a kind of an bumbling or imbecile kind of a way. And I think it's just fantastic when he gets to stand up and we have this scrawny Steve and he just doesn't know what he's doing. But I'm sure he's thinking, if only the 4F doctor could see me now.
Yeah, right. I love that. I think that look is great. For me, I'm so glad you brought up Back to the Future. That's not what I thought of. I thought immediately of Spy Who Loved Me and Jaws, the reveal of Jaws's sheer size on the train, and those sorts of sequences, those tropes are super handy shortcuts that we get here to see this monster in front of us, and then such a quick cut to that first punch knocking Steve down, which I think is just chef's kiss, perfect, taking us toward the end of the minute.
Totally.
And Steve's not the person who's going to take a hit and just fall down. I mean, he gets punched into the kind of the corner, immediately scrambles back up. I mean, he's not even trying to swing or defend himself. He's there ready to kind of stop the bully is really what he's doing. And he's going to keep standing up to him. He takes those 2 punches. And then at the very end of this minute, we get that fantastic moment where he grabs the lid of the trash can as he's stumbling up and spins around. I like to call this Shield Mark 1. It's just the perfect first Shield usage that we get of him. And it's the trash can lid is full of concentric circles, which very much looks like the Shield. I mean, it is perfectly designed to kind of give us that early nod in the film.
And I love that was his big idea, especially that what we find out in just seconds is that it doesn't work very well. It's a really bad idea.
In the comics, it is an insult that a lot of the villains will say that he has a trash can lid, that he's holding a trash can lid. So.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I only have one other thing for this minute. I just wanted to mention the music during the newsreel. The first is a piece called Sable and Spurs by John Philip Sousa, which is a very kind of militaristic, patriotic sort of march. The second, though, and I find this very interesting, it's actually a piece of film score from the movie The Bad and the Beautiful, composed by David Raxon, and it's actually called Newsreel March. So it's actually newsreel music composed for a movie that clearly is used in this film and probably other movies when we see newsreels. Yeah, I thought that was really funny. Do you Kurtis, do you have any last thoughts with this one?
So this scene with Steve, the last minute and this minute, I watched with my kids a few years ago as we were going through the Marvel Universe, kind of leading. This is actually a number of years ago now, because we were watching them all so that they could see Infinity War in the movie theater. It would have been their first Marvel movie in the theater.
Oh,
so we're going through all of these movies, and they're 8, and maybe 7 to 9 or something like that. That's their age, and I didn't really have to explain a whole lot of stuff to them with the movies that came before this. There's a few odd instances of explaining, but when we got to this scene, and we take it for granted just because of our education or whatever, we know what 4F stands for, and we know about movie newsreels and why the guy's yelling for a cartoon and stuff. But I actually had to stop and explain, what does 4F mean, and what is Steve signing up for? And, place that all kind of in context, as they had no idea. They don't know anything about World War II. So I found that interesting that this was kind of the first time out of all the Marvel movies up to this point that I had to, stop and actually explain. And I think it was necessary, especially because these are real world events that they're referencing, that they have the context for why it's so important.
I don't think we've even said 4F stands for, it just is a military classification. It says you're unfit for duty, unfit for service.
Yeah, 1A would mean that you are top of the line, ready to go right away.
Yeah, I think those are the only two stamps that they were giving. I mean, I don't know if they were evaluating people to quite that extent, but I think it was largely either the 1A or the 4F that they would stamp.
Other classifications would be like, this person can't go because they have responsibilities, and it would be like 3G0 or something like that. There are other classifications. But as far as your physical fitness, I think it was just 1A or 4F. And so when I'm watching I love Looney Tunes. Like all of these classic animation from this era, I absolutely love. And small plug is I wrote a book about Chuck Jones. It's called The Dream That Never Was. And so when all of these cartoons have all of these references as well for 4F and 1A, and they make jokes about that all the time. And I didn't know what those were growing up either. I had to kind of look it up for myself. So I was happy to be able to explain it to my kids, so save them the trouble.
It's interesting that, I guess it speaks to the fact that that's part of the element of this being a period film, is that, as kids, they're more attuned to the real world around them. So when they're watching Tony Stark and the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, Thor, Jane, in modern times, there's less of that sort of stuff that they have to think about because it's not connected to something different. But this really is, because of those elements that are elements of history that they really kind of need to understand a little bit so they can kind of get that.
Yep.
There are so many of these classifications. I had not looked up the actual classification map. There are a lot of them. So many.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, that's a lot of stamps to have.
Many stamps.
This one, to the point that you were saying about for the physical, as it relates to the physical, this form that he stamps does very specifically say right over the box, for stamp 1A/4F. So, at least we know on this form, those are the only two stamps that they're going to be putting into this.
And at the time, the only ones that they really were caring about when you're standing in front of the medical officer.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think I have anything else for this minute. What was it, Kurtis? Do you remember your first time watching this in the theater? Did you see this one in the movie theaters?
Oh yes, I've seen all of them in the theater. Yeah, it was great.
Do you remember Do you remember that first time?
Yep, I do. It was fantastic, especially because I've made a point in trying to see all of these opening night, and man, at the end of this movie, the crowd just went absolutely nuts. So it was just like so good. But yeah, seeing this one in theater was fantastic. I've long loved the Rocketeer, and never saw that one in the theater because I was too young, I think. But seeing this one made me think about what it would have been like to see the Rocketeer in the movie theater.
Loved the Rocketeer. Oh,
yep, me too.
There's something that Joe Johnston does well when it comes to kind of that period stuff. Like, yeah. I don't know. He's a really interesting director. I love that he kind of came from the world of effects and everything. But my favorite movie of his is, I don't know, I love October Sky. I think Jurassic Park 3, total guilty pleasure. I love that one. I know a lot of people think it's one of the least of the Jurassic films, but I have a soft spot in my heart for it. But really, it's like you think of him as a director, and pre-Captain America, The Rocketeer stands out as the one that, Jumanji made a lot of money. The Rocketeer wasn't a huge moneymaker, but that seems to have really clicked with people. I know so many people who have such a fondness for that particular film, and it speaks to him in that period, right?
Yep. Well, I think it has a lot of the same themes of a guy that wants to do good and such, and it's I don't know. I think I personally just love the era, so that one just is like I love watching movies like that.
Yeah,
he really. he just in The Rocketeer he made Captain America. Right, just without the right language. It's still about this underdog character who finds something that unlocks his inner ability to do good in the world, and it just works as an artifact of history.
Yeah. Fighting Nazis and blimps.
Yeah, right. So good.
Oh, it's so good. It's great stuff. All right. Well, let's wrap this one up, unless either of you two have any last little thoughts or anything.
I just wish we knew, and I hope this is unlocked in the next minute next week, but there he is, standing in the alley, the underdog, holding the trash can.
Yeah.
Will we ever know how long he can do this?
Yeah, no kidding. How long is he going to be able to keep that up?
How long can he do
I just don't know.
That's a good question. Maybe we'll find out next week. We shall see. All right, Kurtis, why don't you remind everybody one last time where they can find more information about you, your podcast, all that good stuff.
If you head over to epicmarvelpodcast.com, I am there with a podcast about Marvel Comics, classic stuff, and I love to hear from you, your feedback and such. So you can leave comments there or on our various social media platforms. You can just look up Epic Marvel Podcast and you'll find me.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we will be back next week with minutes 11 through 15. Should be another fun week to talk about. So, Pete, we'll talk to you then.
Nice work, Timmy.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.